Hi. So I want to do my July wrap-up. It is summertime, so I should have had a lot of time to read, but I haven't read that much. I've read a total of 10 books this month. I think it's okay. The book that I started out with was Wisdom and Humanness in Psychology, Prospect for a Christian Approach by C. Stephen Evans. And this is a book about how to approach psychology from a Christian perspective and to include the truths we find in the Bible and God into the field of psychology. That is a field that has evolved into this humanitarian field of study. And it shouldn't be a only humanitarian field of study when the Bible has a lot to say about the field of psychology. So it's about how to include the truth about God, who created us, into the study of our minds. It was a good read. It made me think, and it has some really good chapters in it. Then I read a book by one of the champions of libertarianism, and he's called Frederick Bastiat, and he wrote this book called The Law, and it is a book about what the role of the law should be in a society. And I think it's really important because there is not much discussion about the way a law should be and what law should do, and instead there are a lot of arbitrary laws passed to defend rights that are not really rights. And it is considered a classic from Bastiat. This is also kind of an important read in these times of Brexit, and why a country should not leave their laws to some bureaucratic entity that you really cannot influence that much. So, The Law by Frederick Bastiat. Then I read this book or memoir called Flirting with Monasticism, Finding God on Ancient Paths. And this is a memoir of the kind that includes finding out about the monastic orders and at the same time experiencing attraction to one of the monks there. And it is written by Calvin E. Sloan. It was interesting, but not really very deep and very informative book, so it was an okay read. Then I read a book by Søren Kierkegaard that is called The Two Discourses of God and Man, and it's 2 essays that he wrote about the relation God-man, and I read it because it was fairly short, and I wanted to read something of Kierkegaard to find out how his style of writing was before I go into his more bigger works. I read it on my phone, so the cover is like this. The next book was kind of a hard book to read, and it is called Philosophy of Mind by Edward Feser, and it is about how our mind works and the mind-body problem. What is our mind and what makes us conscious and what makes us think. And it was hard because I thought it should be like I said, it's a beginner's guide, but it wasn't really a beginner's guide. It was kind of dry and heavy at some times. And I think Edward Feser's writing is a little bit hard to read through, but still it said a lot about the discussion, even though I thought it was a little bit unnecessary in its complexity. Then I finally finished a book that I have been reading for a long time, and that is How We Know by Harry Binswanger. And this is a book about epistemology from an objectivist standpoint or foundation, and this defends the view or the philosophical, it explains the philosophical view about how we can know that something is true and is founded in reality. and it takes start from all the basics, and then it builds up this foundation that ends up in logic and reason and these more higher level concepts. So it's a really great book because it contains so much, but it takes a long time to read because it's so thorough. So it's like a philosophical textbook, and it takes time to read, and but it's still easy to read and easy to understand because it explains the material so well. So I really recommend this if you want to read something about epistemology. I think this is a good place to start. Then I read a young adult book, fiction, and it is called Det mystiske ansiktet, or The Mystical Face. And I read it because David Olshard, the author, is a friend of mine, and I wanted to read it, as well as the theme about the Shroud of Turin was kind of interesting. So I read it, and I really like the historical aspect and the factual discussions it involved about the shroud and other relics. But as a young adult book, I didn't enjoy it that much because I'm not that kind of reader. Then I read Proverbs, Wisdom for Today, and this is by Bob Yandian. And the first two chapters are the introduction and the foreword, basically, was the best part of this book, because the rest is only verse by verse kind of commentary on the books of Proverbs, and it tries to give a twist of how we can use it in today's society. But I think it's just the simplistic and kind of typical preachy book, instead of the informative and scholarly work that I hoped it would have been. But yeah, I didn't really know much before I started reading it. So then I borrowed a book from my friend that he was reading, and it was so short, so I read it in one sitting, and it was Listen to Your Heart by Kenneth Hagin Jr. And it's an okay inspirational book about listening to your heart, but I didn't think it managed to really explain what heart was and what mind was, in the sense of the spirit, the heart, or mind, and the Holy Spirit. He kind of mixed those up a little bit, so I think it wasn't theologically really heavy, but as an inspirational book it was kind of good. And then the last book that I finished was Truth on Its Head, Unusual Wisdom in the Paradoxes of the Bible, by Warren W. Wiersbe. And this is 15 paradoxes that he has identified in the Bible, that he explains and shows where they are, how they are present in the Bible, and then maybe have a story or two about how it works in the world today and how it's used, and what you can learn about the paradoxes. And I think this was actually an okay read, but it's clearly written very easily by following a formula, and each chapter is kind of written to stand on its own legs, so there are some repetition in there. And of course the listings of the Bible verses are not very engaging to read about, but it's still a good book for looking up where to find the verses in the Bible about these paradoxes. And that was all of the 10 books I managed to read in July. I hope you also had a good reading month.